discussed a very wide range of practices and objects connected to the magical protection of buildings today, and a little bit kind of more widely also. And I made my PhD thesis on these kinds of things in Finland, and that thesis was published in 2016, and you can find it online if you're interested. Now I have started looking more closely at magical objects in museum collections. And the issue that I wish to discuss today is what makes the hidden charms useful? Why are these specific objects chosen to be concealed? And since the finds of concealed objects alone do not tell about specific beliefs connected to the practice, I use 19th century folklore or customary lore material to help answer my questions. And we have a very lot of that in Finland recorded, so it's useful. Before moving on to the topic at hand, I thought to quickly introduce my research area. And Finland is a Nordic country right between Sweden and Russia. And the climate is quite harsh with long cold winters, and the landscape is dominated by forests and lakes. And actually coming here, well, I suppose this heat is not usual here at this time of the year, but it really felt like a bit of a shock because we still have snow patches here and there. So. I also added a picture of the typical simple log house in Finland during most of its historical period on this slide. And I just thought to remind that when we are discussing charms concealed in buildings, we should not forget the buildings themselves. Even though I will not talk about buildings today, it's just to remind how they look like. And I had the words pre-mechanistic worldview in the title of this talk. And what I mean by this is the worldview that prevailed before mandatory school attendance taught everyone that the world works mechanically like a clock. And of course this is a generalization. It didn't work actually just perfectly. But in Finland, this shift in worldview started in the late 19th century, and the mechanistic view was more or less established by the time of the Second World War. So in Finland, we heard about the Romanian examples where the traditions still prevail, but in Finland there has happened a shift so that the old traditions are not known anymore. There are of course different kinds of belief systems also still there, or actually they're new. The picture on the slide is there to remind us that as late as the 1940s, when the picture was taken, life was quite different from what it is today, and of course that affected the way people saw how the world works. And this is very much the context of these things that we are talking about. And magic practices and magic objects were an everyday part of this pre-mechanistic worldview. And even though there are regional differences, many of the objects that are seen as powerful seem to be known all around Europe and even beyond. And for example, some animals occur often as magical creatures, such as frogs or toads, snakes, and wild predators. The bear is very popular in Finland, especially its teeth and claws are widely used in magic practices. And of course, now when I talk about the Finnish folklore material, I'm kind of showing what kind of explanations were given for why these things worked in the Finnish context, and can have, even though they are the same materials and same objects, can have been different, for example here, why they are seen as useful. But in fact, on the picture down to the right, which shows magic objects in the collection of the Satakunta Museum, the dried viper is a hidden charm. And the viper was found inside a hole drilled into a wall timber of a building in Karavia, and the hole had been plugged with a wooden plug. And the building was built in the 17th century, but the concealment could have been made later as well, because it was in a timber that was accessible. And the viper seems to be in quite good condition. It was found in 1908, so it might have been not concealed very much earlier than that. These kinds of viper concealments are also well known in folklore, and they are very often mentioned to be protective charms. According to the museum catalogue, the snake was thought to protect the residents against the evil eye, thieves, and other misfortunes, so a very broad kind of thing. But what makes the viper useful for such a purpose is of course the question of this talk. And the Finnish folklore tells about special power called väki. And this word is still in use in contemporary Finnish, and it has a dual meaning. It refers both to people and to power, and of course those are connected. Of course, a group of people are powerful, but this kind of is people, and it's also more abstract power. And these two meanings are central to the use of this word in magic contexts as well. And in this kind of magic context, väki means both personal, otherworldly agency, such as guardian spirits of nature or guardian spirits of buildings as well, and the people, and a more impersonal power believed to situate in nature, materials and objects. And in the pre-mechanistic worldview, the workings of the world was understood through human-like actors and agency instead of as mechanic clockwork, and the world was basically seen as alive. And this kind of väki agency was connected with different natural spheres and elements, the forest, rock, water, wind, fire, for example. And in the folklore material, it's very clear that these different types of väki agencies were of different strength, and they could be used against each other in a magic practice. So you could kind of obtain this kind of power. For example, the power of water you could obtain by picking some water from a specific place, usually something like a rapids, and then you could use the väki of water in a ritual. And the different types of väki did not get along with each other. For example, the agency of fire did not get along with the agency of water. So these ideas were rooted in everyday experiences of how these elements reacted to each other. And for example, the burn marks that have been mentioned many times today, if they were in a Finnish context, I would kind of interpret that it's the agency of fire that has been used to protect the building, but of course it can be different here. And this agency also manifested in hard, sharp, and kind of aggressive elements, but also in curiously shaped materials and objects, such as naturally formed circles. Those occur often. And also outstanding places in the landscape were dwelling places of this kind of väki power. And specific animals, they're very strong in this väki: bears, other predators, snakes, frogs, and so on. And the väki of these animals was connected with their natural element, and thus the bear had forest väki, and the frog had water väki. Or this could be said in a different way, that the bear was forest people and the frog was water people. And as I mentioned, these folk beliefs did base on everyday experience of how elements react. Only the explanation might seem unfamiliar to us who are raised in a different worldview. And things that are dangerous in everyday use are also seen as dangerous in a magical context. And as one can use a knife to attack someone, one can also use a knife to protect oneself. The folklore specifically explains that harmful supernatural creatures, such as the nightmare, they're afraid of sharp tools. So it's very clear that this kind of dangerousness of the sharp things also works for the supernatural creatures. But there's also this kind of idea that iron that the tool was made of also was powerful in itself, and that has also been discussed today, that the fairy, for example, did not like iron. But this is a widespread belief, but in Finnish, in Finland it's again explained through this idea of the väki agency. Iron had its own väki, and for example, when someone accidentally cut themselves with a knife, it was a sign that the person had somehow angered the väki of iron. And one could anger this kind of different väki powers by improper and careless behavior. So being absent-minded while carving wood with a knife could easily irritate the väki of the knife. And in order to heal a wound caused like this, one needed to appease the väki of iron by proper offerings and incantations. So it was that you always needed to know that these kind of väki powers are kind of dormant in the normal conditions, but if you do something wrong, they manifest and you can hurt yourself or get an illness. And the poisonous viper also had its own väki, and it was manifest in the venom. Again, it's kind of what is dangerous in the everyday context is also useful in magic. And it was believed that the viper gathered its power, the venom, from the ground, so it belonged to earth väki or earth people. What about cats then? They are not so dangerous as a viper or a bear. And cats have a special place in many magic practices, and they are seen as witches' familiars, for example. And we have a lot of opposite ideas connected to cats. Sometimes they bring good luck, and sometimes they bring bad luck. And in any case, they seem to have had a close connection to the other world, and they're perhaps because they are active at night. And they also occur as hidden charms quite often, as we have seen here. But at the moment, I have not managed to find folklore explaining which type of väki was connected with the cat in Finnish beliefs. And I might still come across this information when I keep studying magical agency, and hopefully I will. Because I recently found folklore explaining the väki of the horse, and I was really searching for this when I was doing my thesis, and I didn't find it then, which would have been nice, but I found it now, so now you're going to hear about what was left out of my thesis. Horse skulls occur frequently as hidden charms, and in Finland they are usually hidden in hearth structures, fireplaces, in order to keep vermin away. As in this for example on the slide. When building a hearth in a new home, one should conceal the horse skull in the foundation. Then cockroaches will not come to this building. And this is very typical, both the context and the explanation of why horse skulls should be used. But this connection between horses and vermin was really puzzling for me. What's the idea here? And what I did know is that vermin are usually earth väki, or earth people, since they crawl and breathe in the ground. And but I could not find what kind of people the horse was until now. This quite long folklore account explains why it is dangerous to swim a horse across waters. And it's a very good example of the things that people needed to take into account in their everyday life. So I'll read the entire thing for you. And this is, of course, my own translation, so it's in Finnish, but I tried my best. So, when a horse needs to be swum across the sound, one should take 3 stones from the shore, and while the horse is led into the water, one should throw the stones into the lake and say, "The hound to the ground, we to the water. Water to us, coin to the king. The king is famous for gold, the ruler for silver." Then the water will not oppress the horse, even if one has angered the guardian spirit of the water. Then when one has reached the other shore, one pours silver into the lake and chant offering words, so the guardian spirit of the water will not become angered. If one does not pay for swimming a horse, one angers the lake guardian spirit. The horse is an animal that belongs to his Väki, and it is not a favorite of the water guardian spirit. So the horse is his people, but what or who is his? And this is not completely straightforward, so things are not as simple as one would wish. The original meaning of Hiisi referred to sacred groves and cemeteries, and the word had a very positive meaning to begin with, even though sacred places are also always a little bit scary as well. In Christian-influenced later folklore, Hiisi are depicted as demonic or trickster-like entities, often the original pagan inhabitants of the land, similar in this respect to mythological giants. And they are found near outstanding geographical features or rough terrain. And really, I don't think that these two meanings contradict each other, even though it might first seem like it. The mythological ancestors of the land probably practiced offerings in sacred groves and are buried in Iron Age cemeteries. And in fact, the Finnish Iron Age burials contain a lot of horse teeth. So this connection really intrigued me. As very powerful mythological creatures, the Hiisi must have been stronger than the earth people that vermin belonged to, and that's why the horse repelled vermin. That's my theory at the moment. But the oldest Väki, water is usually mentioned to be the oldest and strongest Väki, was even stronger than Hiisi. So offerings and other rituals were needed when these two elements came into contact. So here are the main points of this talk. First of all, objects and materials have been seen as potentially alive and capable of agency in the pre-mechanistic worldview. And different types of agency or different kinds of people varied in strength and were non-compatible. And thus they could be manipulated against each other. When healing an illness caused by some kind of Väki, the healer could use stronger Väki as a medicine, for example. And this is very, very visible in folklore about healing magic, when the healing ritual would always begin with divining what type of Väki had caused the illness and then knowing what type of Väki we could use as medicine. And the mundane usefulness of an object is connected with its symbolism, and this is why things that are dangerous in everyday context were also dangerous in magical setting. And I think this point is kind of a relief for us who are studying these things, that there are hints that we can kind of hold on to when we don't have any folklore explaining things. But some of the agencies can be deduced from the mundane use of an object, but others are less obvious for someone not familiar with the older worldview, like the horse. Horse being his people is not something that I could have simply guessed without this kind of material that I found. But now when I found it, it makes a lot of sense. Many other things that I've been noticed is like in many incantations, when you kind of the cunning person who is doing the incantation needs something to travel somewhere, like travel to find out what the cure is. The incantation would go, I'll take a horse from Hiisi, for example. So it's like the evidence is there, but I needed this one example to really open my eyes. And thank you. Here's the name of my postdoc project, and they're addressed to a description of it if anyone is interested. And actually the first kind of related paper also came out this week, so if anyone wants that, please just let me know and I'll email it to you.